Are you almost like a lawyer? Because you can represent people in court, right?
You can, yeah. Tax court, the CPA does have the ability to speak on the taxpayer's behalf. And I don't think tax preparers can do that without certain certifications.
Yeah. Where do you see most businesses go wrong financially?
The tax returns are going to be the number one way businesses and individuals can really mess up their financial strategy. Yeah.
So what's some tips to try to keep yourself straight if you're a new business owner, new entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, the very first thing is to make it a real entity with the state. So that's here, the state of Ohio. Other places you can start it within your state, but creating an LLC is the preferred way. There are a bunch of different business entity structures that you can choose, but an LLC is the most flexible and it's the easiest one to create. So creating a business entity, making it a real thing, that way it then can do its own thing. It can buy cars, it can employ people, it can take out loans and credit cards and all that stuff. If you do it under your personal name, you are at risk for everything that you have. So there is no limited liability there. So that's really important when you're doing a business. So that's the first thing.
The LLC is like a buffer between the world and your assets.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
If you start, can you start a business in your own personal name?
You can, yeah. It's called a sole proprietorship.
Sole proprietor. Okay.
And you can, but again, that's just a whole lot of risk, especially if you are doing more like a service business where people are relying on your word. If something were to happen and they sue, they could go for everything that you have. With that LLC, they block that.
Yeah. As much protection as possible.
Exactly.
Excuse me. Can you kind of explain some of the changes that you saw in the game from the things that Trump did?
Yeah, so he increased deductions for certain people, which meant that you had to be really smart about how you moved whenever they started. So 2019 on, you have to be really smart about how you do different things, because if you're unaware, then you missed out hugely on, especially depreciation, as I mentioned before. He changed it to where you can have 100% of certain things that you buy deducted on your tax return. So a lot of people, they didn't know that. Another thing is he increased your standard deduction. So if you have ever heard of being able to donate to charities and putting that on your tax return, he took that away for a lot of people. So now you have to donate more for it to make an effect on your tax return. So small things like that, it benefited certain people and really took the game out for other people.
It's increasing the gap, right?
Yeah.
Between poor and rich.
It is.
Because I know a lot of people been hearing like they're trying to eliminate a middle class. And a lot of the things that's popping up, it seemed that way. I think that's where that scramble to increase your skill level and add value to yourself is coming.
Yeah.
You get all these entrepreneurs out here. America is made for entrepreneurs. Like, if you don't have a business here, you're a slave.
Right. You're missing out. You're missing out hugely. And I think that's one of the main things that we teach at Providum is a good financial strategy starts and ends with the tax return. If you don't understand the tax return and what's happening on there, or you only think about it at the end of the year, you're missing out.
So let's say somebody is starting their business mid-year. They just want to start a business.
Yep.
What would you do about like me personally? I'm not solidified as far as the LLC.
Okay.
I need to be.
Okay.
But I do buy a gang of supplies, shirts, all this type stuff, cameras, lights, and stuff.
Yeah.
What would you tell people to do? Do you still keep those receipts? How do you do that? Is it a way to?
It is. So have a separate bank account for anything that you are doing related to the business. That's the best way to keep things organized. Receipts are good, but if you give receipts, one to like a CPA like me, it's either going to cost you a whole lot for me to have to go through all the receipts and figure that out, or if you don't keep track of all the receipts, then you're missing out on expenses, which missing out on deductions, which means you're paying more taxes. Mm-hmm. So keeping everything in one bank account helps you to stay organized. Mm-hmm. And then connecting that bank account to an accounting software like Wave, like QuickBooks, those are going to be also ways that you can stay organized, make sure you're claiming all of the deductions that are available to you, and that you have the proof for when you give it on a tax return. Because if they ask you a question, you got to be able to show proof.
All right.
Yeah.
The show proof stage is coming, man.
It is. They just put out a press release that they were going to start increasing audits especially for small businesses. And that means that we have to have all of that documentation and we have to have it saved.
It seemed like entrapment. It's like when you're rolling down the street and it's a cop sitting behind like a sign, and they're trying to catch people. So it's almost like they're putting things in play. Like, I feel like the PPP is going to set a lot of people up for like failure or something.
Only if you do it wrong. Like with the tax return documentation, right?
Yeah.
If I just make up numbers, then surely that's not right. But if you have all the documentation, or even if you just put down what you're estimating on paper so that you can show it to someone else, then you're fine. So I think that it's only entrapment if you don't have the right process.
Yeah. It's interesting. This is going to be an interesting year, I feel like. This year and next year, man.
It is.